I am live. What the fuck do you mean? Fuck you. Fuck you. No, fuck you. Okay, it's live now. Happy, happy, happy. Happy, happy, happy. Let me just share the frickin' stream. Starting. And then you go to stream elements, and we're gonna do a little fun thing. A little fun thing. Oh, I guess I should also. I guess I should do what I fucking said and also at everyone in fucking Sunday server. I freaking guess. I freaking guess. I guess I'll do that. I guess. Mag or else Mag will freaking yell at me later. Sunday or Bruno. Yes. In the 6th chapter of Proverbs, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise." I tried that, and the ant didn't know the answer either. And that's true. And that is correct. Alright. Oh, I didn't get the thing set up. Okay, we're gonna do that. That's one of the things we're gonna do. Alright, everyone. I have a little freaking surprise for you. I have a little freaking surprise! Oh. Eh. Why can't I? Why can't I click? This is my mouse. Well, it's not gonna let me. But look, we can frickin' draw now. We can frickin' scribble. We can frickin' do a little scribble. Look. Look what we can do. And we can also... We can erase! Oh my frickin' god. We can write stuff out. We can frickin' do that. How cool is that? Don't you guys think that's so awesome? You're like, that's so awesome sauce. That's so freaking awesome sauce. And it is. It is awesome sauce. I agree. I support this. But enough me to lang, because we do have to cover like a million pages, just about. It is just about a trillion freaking pages. I hope my mic is okay. I didn't test it. But my mic is what it was last time. So that means it should be good. But I didn't test this, so might be wrong. But yeah, now we can draw. There we go. But without further ado, let us start. The contribution of politicians. To understand how various skills can be combined to offer the collective its various competencies, we need to turn to the other professions, beginning with that of the politicians, which is attached to the same associations of humans and non-humans, but according to a very different set of skills from those to which the lab coats have accustomed us. The term politician does not correspond to a precise profession any more than the term scientist does. Figure 4.2. We're simply shortening with existing callings as good sense offers them to us, in order to detect their contributions to the six functions of the collective that are the only things to which we are concerned at the moment. And then where is 4.2? This is 4.2. And the footnote, I guess, is important. Each of the trades here, that of the politicians, contributes equally to the six functions of the collective. And even though I don't, this is probably important to highlight, just because politicians, as we are now well aware, do not exercise their skill on a separate domain of reality, the social world, values, power relations. They share at first glance the same functions as the scientists, but with other skills. At first glance, it may seem strange to ask politicians to make a contribution right alongside the instruments of laboratory researchers to the perplexity of the collective number one. According to a scarcely acceptable prejudice that contrasts the scientist attentive to the facts with a politician who would betray the people who voted for him by speaking in their place. In Factors Gods, there is a line, kind of a very important line, in the beginning. The interviewer asked the politicians, are you creating the representation out of whole cloth? The politician answers yes. Yes, of course. And then it goes on to ask, the interview goes on to ask, so then don't you think you aren't representing them correctly? It was something like this. And he goes, well, no, I am representing them. I give them their voice. And then the politician is accused of doublespeak. How could it be the politician who is creating this representation out of whole cloth also be speaking for the people? But the politician very much does. It's a kind of the thing. It's kind of related to Latour's idea of, well, it's not kind of. It is related to Latour's idea of a spokesperson. And for Latour, spokespersons are not just for politics, but also for science. And the spokesperson's job is to represent whatever it may be. That's a spokesperson job. But 273, 23. Okay, and we're on 270. This prejudice is found throughout political, in parentheses, economy. To define this rational force of falsification, Lakatos gives a precise definition of an election. But the parallel escapes him, since for him politics means red hordes trampling the due process of science alone. Lakatos, 1978. For the contrary view, see Cologne, 1995. This seems like something I should look into. Fuck, what page was I on? 143. Almost 144. In truth, neither the one nor the other can be unaware of the speech of those whom they represent, both precisely being faithful, both precisely and faithfully. Both politicians and of their own is a certain sense of danger stemming from the multitude of excluded entities that can return to haunt the collective and demand to be taken into account this time. Let us recall that the power to take into account is never the absolute beginning of the process, but always its resumption. This is good. Um, it is the resuming of a process. We are always taking things into account. It's kind of like, I guess, the point he's getting at here, which is it follows a lot from what he talks about previously. Um, Nothing proves that those humans and non-humans whom we have decided to do without are not going to come back and knock at the door, thanks to the imperceptible movements that will have to be detected as quickly as possible. The entire competence of politicians consists in living in this permanent state of risk through which when they attempt to form an us, they hear responses in the form of a more or less inarticulate cries. You maybe, but not us. It is precisely in collaborating with scientists and hovering over the same instruments the detection of dangerous propositions by politicians is going to be able to nourish public life by responding to the requirement of external reality. No one will deny that politicians have the skill that will allow them to contribute decisively to consultation. Number two, just as the researchers have learned to construct controversies to referee them through convincing experiments, the politicians have learned more than anyone else to form concerned parties, reliable witnesses, opinionated stakeholders. Politicians are often criticized for the artificiality of the constructions through which representative authorities are produced, agencies that have the right to speak, even though they have nothing special to say because they have not been given the capacity to produce their own questions. The critics forget that the multiplications of artifices to fabricate agents that can say yes or no is at least as important a skill as the construction of facts by researchers in laboratories. Without the work of a production of voices, there would no longer be any voices at all. Without that artificial and ingenious research, without the continuous explorations of those who may have to sit on the jury that rules on candidates for existence, it is impossible to speak of successful consultation. It is the basic job of politicians not to create out of whole cloth voices that stammer, that protest, that express opinions. Is this not what explains their ceaseless coming and going, their constant alertness, their ever-renewed resumption, their uninterrupted worry, their speech impedimentia? So fucking good so far. Mixed from now on with the voices of colleagues and reliable witnesses who are led to judge the quality of matters of concern, this production of voices is not going to create a big ruckus, but will instead bring together an assembly that is already more credible, more serious, more authorized. Scientists left to themselves would never be able to extend consultation to fulfill the requirement of relevance. They would have a tendency to agree among themselves much too rapidly, once the ad hoc group of competent judges was defined. Helped by the politicians, they will now be able to detect for every candidate entity the jury that is adequate to evaluate its existence according to its own requirement and in relation to its own problems. This is all very fucking good. I'm actually going to go back. And there we go. 174. Sorry, 274. Sorry. I didn't mean to cough into my fucking mic. Let us recall the admirable example of the Swiss referendum on genetically modified organisms. No scientist worthy of the name would have forgotten to consult the genes, the field experts, the antibiotics, the corn, and rapeseed flowers. Yet politicians had to intervene brutally afterward to allow the consultation to add the humans who were going to profit most directly from the benefits of biogenetics. They had been forgotten. When scientists are added, justice is done to Habermas's requirement. Just those actions and norms are valid to which all possibly affected persons could agree as participants in rational discourse. But Habermas can never make this an operational requirement, since he has driven the non-humans out of his city, as Plato drove the artists out of his. You're all good. It's all fine, you don't have to donate. Does Patreon use PayPal? I could also just create a Patreon. Can you just tip on Patreon? Do you have to subscribe? Do you have to subscribe to Patreon? I think you do. I don't think you can just tip. I'll look into that. And maybe I'll also make a Patreon. Maybe I'll also Yeah. Yeah, so you can just frickin' you can just do whatever the fuck, yeah. Okay, well I'll do that later. I'll do that later then. Because I forget, yeah, not everyone will be using PayPal because I just use it so I can frickin' give Sunday lots of money without having to worry about YouTube taking like 30% of it, I think it is. That's the reason why I do it. Despite appearances to the contrary, it is not because they deal especially with humans that politicians contribute usefully to hierarchy. Number 3. For anyone who wasn't here for the previous ones, when he's referencing the numbers, he's referencing these. The first goal in the upper house is perplexity. The second function is perplexity. The first function is perplexity. The second is consultation. The third is hierarchy. The fourth is institution. The fifth is the separation between the upper and lower house. And then the sixth one is the as he calls it, the scenarization of the totality, which was like it literally just came up in the one of the previous sections. It was like one of the ones that just came up. So just for that. In practice, politicians have never dealt with humans, but always with associations of humans and non-humans, cities and landscapes, productions and diversions, things and people, genes and properties, goods and attachments. In brief, cosmograms. And this will probably be a frickin' link to Isabel Stenger's. 274. Is it? I didn't look. Take up a useful expression from Tresh, 2001. No, but this is also interesting. I'm gonna highlight that for later. 145. No, their principal competence, the one that even the most imaginative scientists cannot emulate, comes from their aptitude to compromise. Highlight that. Politicians are always criticized with scornful accusations of compromised deals and combinations, and those are precisely at this stage the most indispensable of virtues. There is in fact no homogeneity in the hierarchy of choices that must be made between the various propositions which are presented as improbable collages, cadavers, cadavers exquisite corpses. The combing through which it will be possible to arrange incommensurable beings in order from the largest to the smallest can come to fruition only if the interests, intentions, positions of each of the components are constantly modified. This is also good. Hello, Shakespeare. We're freaking reading The politics of nature. We're like halfway through, and the politics of nature is really fucking good. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say. The politics of nature is just like excellent. It's just amazing. It's just great. Um, on my downtime, I'm reading AIM, and um, AIM might become RAO. Um, when I get into AIM, we are actually going to, if I can get into the bibliography of it, we're gonna fucking track down every single source we can, and go through it. But that won't be for a while because AIM is 500 pages. It is Latour's longest book, and it is like Factish Gods, according to Brooks, which makes sense now that I'm thinking about it. But it's going to be like Factish Gods, where there's going to be a lot to it, and it's going to be a lot. Just going to be a lot. Is like just the best way I can say it. The spokespersons must in return modify those whose opinion they are supposed to respect faithfully. Faithfulness changes meaning. No scientist deigns to follow this perilous path, which to him looks like a lie. I should have waited to highlight until I finished the paragraph. However, it is on this point that we see the full advantage of the collaboration between scientists and politicians. Collaboration of which the old distinction between the paradise of science and the hell of the social world deprived us up to now. In fact, the politician's capacity for translation slash betrayal corresponds to the requirement of hierarchy, only provided that they constantly rely on the scientist's aptitude for offering innovations and compromises. Only together can they succeed in modifying the opinions of their constituents and also displace the burdens onto other less important beings. There is in so we might actually, do I have it up? Do I have it up? I don't. I'm gonna get it up. Um, let's see. I'm gonna take a bit of a detour. Science in action. Science in action. We're taking a detour. Um, to a important concept for this book. Um, we're gonna search for manager instead. We're gonna take this whole paragraph because I think this is the paragraph I'm thinking of that's good. The situation, however, is the source of a major weakness. Who is speaking? Things were the people through the representative's voice. What does she or he or they or it say? Only the things they represent would say if they could talk directly. The point is that they cannot. What the dissenter sees is in practice rather different from what the speaker sees. Bill, for instance, says his workers want to strike, but this might be Bill's own desire or a union decision relayed by him. The manager, looking through the window, may see a crowd of assembled workers who are just passing the time and can disperse the smallest threat. At any rate, do they really want 3% and not 4% or 2%? And even so, is it not possible to offer Bill this Japanese car he so dearly wants? Is the voice of the worker not going to change his/its mind if the manager offers a new car to Bill? Take endorphin as another instance. What we really saw was a tiny depression in the regular spikes forming the baseline. Is this the same as the one triggered by morphing? Yes, it is, but what does that prove? It may be that all sorts of chemicals give the same shape in this peculiar assay, or maybe the professor so dearly wishes his substance to be morphing-like that he unwittingly confused two syringes, injecting the same morphine twice, thus producing two shapes that indeed look identical. What is happening? The controversy flares even after the spokesperson has spoken and displayed to the center what he or she was talking about. How can the debate be stopped from proliferating again in all directions? How can all the strength that a spokesperson musters be retrieved? The answer is easy. By letting the things in person represented say for themselves the same thing the representatives claimed they wanted to say. Of course, this never happens since they're designated because, by definition, such direct communication is impossible. Such a situation, however, may be convincingly staged. The point of this, for Latour, is specifically here. He is using the idea of a union boss versus a manager. A union boss goes to a manager, and he says, "My workers, you see, if you don't give us 4% or 3% or whatever the number exactly is, we will go on strike." And the union boss, the manager might look out and he might see, well, it doesn't look like they actually will go on strike. Maybe they seem hesitant. Maybe they get word from like one of the other workers that, they're actually a lot less that likes the manager and is against the strike. The workers are actually a lot less susceptible to strike than the union boss is making them appear. And for Latour is the same as to what happens to scientific objects. Scientific objects also have and kind of the point is, without a staging, without the manager either making a grandstand of a what's it called, to like try to disperse the crowd, or without the union boss making a grandstand, giving a great speech, making all this, there is never any way to tell whether you are speaking faithfully to your constituents. And a similar thing happens in science. You have to stage it so that you can show, as, or at least try to show, that you're being faithful, that you have actually that you didn't just inject morphine twice. You didn't just do that. You didn't just do whatever. That the substance you are using is produces a similar effect. That it actually does this. That you are being faithful to this. And so yeah. That's kind of the detour. But that's the important thing. That's the important thing. That's what all this is kind of. I just wanted to take that detour to explain. It makes sense. I assume you guys probably got that. I got somewhat of that impression from what he's saying now, but I wanted to make it clear, even if we had a little. The two representations can work only in concert, with all their ingenuity combined to discover how to gather the least objectionable of awkward compromises among incommensurable actors. Each of whom is seeking to pass the buck in order to make others pay the price for compromises that are nevertheless indispensable. 174. If anyone has, sorry, 274. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. This collaboration can be observed up close in the establishment of the local water commissions in France. For every catchment, these commissions have to make a plan for shared water use. Sometimes the understanding is reached owing to the discovery by hydrologists of new water reserves, sometimes by the modifications of the constituents represented by one of the spokespersons. The farther who came in to defend his rights to irrigations leaves convinced of the need to defend the river. The we that he represented has changed meaning. Such adjustments are never achieved if one has a nature with fixed resources and a society with established interests. In other words, scientism and the natural sciences on the one side, scientism, the social sciences on the other. Something kind of important in this that I do want to note. When Latour is saying this, he isn't saying that the world changes or that interests change necessarily. That simply the world changes or interest change simply. One of the things he's getting at is the thing he gets at in his book on actor network theory, which is we're never in the uncertainties. We're never certain about these things. There is when we go into these things, we do have to be uncertain about them. Is kind of the thing. And uncertainty is kind of what Latour wants to point to. It is not just simply that it's the case, but a politician, but the social scientist should never say, "Oh, we simply know the interests out of whole cloth," because the politician doesn't. The politician, like just know, or that it's just simply fixed. That it's like, oh, whatever the fuck. Because you don't know. You don't actually know. You might be right. You could just as well be wrong. Because you don't know yet. You don't. And you can't just go in with something and say you know. And so, yeah. Hey, yeah. That's it. We must learn to respect these collaborations in the search for the best combination. Deprived of the marvelous help of a world beyond, their only chance to obtain the best of all possible worlds. The obligation to succeed, politicians shed their brightest light. We have to get on with it, in a hurry. Time is passing. Let's decide. Such is the impulse that suddenly animates the second house when the politicians add their grain of salt. Researchers, too, know how to make decisions to get on with it. As we have seen, the politicians add an even more indispensable skill. They can make enemies. Back to 174. Sorry, back to 274. I keep doing that. 274. On this property of politics, to be modified below, see Schmidt, 1976. 1963, I assume, is the original publication of, I assume it was in German, because I assume this is Carl Schmidt. This is a Sunday reference, guys. This is a Sunday reference. The President Sunday reference. Without this ability, the meaning of decisiveness, the ability to cut to the chase, would be only the mark of arbitrariness, the arbitrariness that so frightened scientists in the other constitution. Worried as they were, they would be obliged to know too soon. Without the ability to divide the collective into friends and enemies, the requirement of closure could never be fulfilled. in order to want to embrace everything, keep everything, satisfy everyone, all the humans and all the non-humans together. The collective, left agape, would no longer be able to learn, so no longer have the capacity to take up again in the next cycle the integration of the excluded entities that would have appealed. For Latour, there isn't real versus unreal. The division is outside of the collective versus inside. When a scientist or a politician, whatever you may think of, goes in, they are trying to figure out what is they are making the decision to internalize or externalize something from the collective to the collective. If it's externalized, it is not in the collective. It is not relevant. It is decisively not relevant. If it is internalized, it is relevant. It is part of the collective. Kind of how it goes. But something that is externalized doesn't have to remain externalized forever. It can be internalized. And conversely, I'm pretty sure if something is internalized, it can also be decisively externalized through the appeals process. The key thing here is through this appeals process that Latour is getting at is the thing. 274, and we have to do 28 and 29. Decision theory is inherited entirely from the myth of the cave, for it has neglected to point out that people also decide about facts and causes. Contribution of the sciences to task number 4. Conversely, as soon as the word decision is applied to discovery of acknowledged facts, it loses some of its trenchancity, its arbitrariness, and becomes the discovery of the solution that is imminent in the situation. Machiavelli becomes a scientist, the sovereign becomes a lab technician. The word decision changes meaning and no longer alternates between the sovereign arbitration, the facts, and the arbitrariness of the sovereign. That's actually really fucking good. Oh wait, I'm actually gonna... Sunday would like this. I think. I think Sunday would really like this. This one in particular, I think. It has a lot, I think, that Sunday can work with in his particular background and make use of. 29. In Chapter 5, I shall come back to this essential definition of the enemy. It must not be humiliated because it might become an ally. In effect, we're going to make it a synonym of externalization. Yes, the enemy is, like I was talking about, it was externalization. I kind of got at that. We're going to also highlight that. Already ahead of them. We can deal quickly with the contributions of politicians to the separation of powers. At least since Montesquieu, the concept comes from them. Sorry. At least since... Okay. The separation of powers comes from the politicians. That's all he's saying. Just want to make sure I was following. I thought that's what he was saying. I just want to make sure. The very idea that one must not unify the work of the collective too rapidly without composing it ahead of time out of waterweight compartments, such as the decisive contribution of political philosophy, the invention of a state of law, the notion of which will take on new meaning once it is connected to the notion of the autonomy of scientific questioning. Still, the politicians are going to defend the frontier by drawing on a different resource from the one scientists use. They're going to insist on the classic distinction between the phases of deliberation and those of decision. Okay. The first house is going to look to them like the precinct of freedom, where people inquire, speak, consult. And the second like the space where necessity is forged, where one establishes hierarchies, chooses, concludes, eliminates. We're actually going to highlight all this. But this venerable distinction between deliberating and deciding is going to take on a new meaning within the Constitution, with the new Constitution. By attributing freedom to humans and necessity to nature, the old regime did not risk slicing up the collective, as Socrates demanded, according to its actual joints. Producing freedom and instituting necessity do not take us back to the division between nature and society, between object and subject, but to the bicameralism of political ecology, the respect for the distinction between the power to take into account, the power to put in order. The formula may still appear shocking, but people deliberate and decide just as much about facts as about values. This is kind of the point that Latour is making. So points 1 through 4. Perplexity, consultation. Fuck, what were the other ones? I forget the other two. Perplexity and consultation were the first one. They were the ones on the top. And there were 2 on the bottom. I forget exactly what they were off the top of my head. I should remember this, but I do not. Previously, under the old bicameralism, as he called it, things were split down the middle vertically, and that created the distinction between facts and values. Under the new bicameralism that Latour is talking about, the new republic, I think, is what the republic is what Latour ends up calling it, instead of the in contrast to the old regime, things are split horizontally. And so, instead of vertically, on one side facts and on the other side values, horizontally, the distinction is instead between the ability to take into account and the power to put in order. That's the distinction. It is probably the last competency of the politicians, the one that produced a scenario for the collective as a whole, number 6, that is the most decisive and that has been neglected the longest. The collective, as we understand now, is not a thing in the world, a being with fixed and definitive borders, but a movement of establishing provisional cohesion will have to be started all over again every single day. Its borders, by definition, cannot be the object of any stabilization, any naturalization, despite the continual efforts of the great scientific narratives to unify what brings us all together under the auspices of nature. To this totalization, the politicians bring a provisional unity to the incessantly resumed circuit of its envelope, what I have called its progressive composition. And let me go back to number 3. We go to number 3, 175. The Plato of Gorgias, still close to the political capacities that he is in the process of stifling one by one, uses the suburb expression autophoesis, self-generation, 513b, to describe and mock this eminence particular to the conditions of felicity of public life. On this vocabulary of sophistics, see Cassin, 1995. John Newey translated the skill particular to the politicians most directly with his very reflexive notion of public, an artificial elaboration that models for itself the unexpected consequences of its action. Go back to 147, maybe? Yes. 1 second. I want to check something. Thank God. Okay. To this the politicians do not hope to fall by an unanticipated stroke of luck on an already constituted whole, even to compose once and for all an us that would no longer need to be reconsidered. They expect the outline of the borders of the collective to come from nothing but the very movement of incessant resumption, rather like the way burning brands trace shapes in the darkness of night, only through the rapid motion to which we subject them. The apologetic stops even for a second. There's no longer anything but a point, a lie, a madman who says, "We all," in the place of others. It is that requirement, properly stupefying, that makes politicians incomprehensible in the eyes of all the other professions, and gets them accused in a facile way of lying and imposture. No one is going to emulate that. Politicians do not lie because they're actually constantly in the process of creating. I'm pretty sure is the point he's getting at. We can measure once again the difference between society and the collective. The notion of society, so cherished by sociologists of the social, eliminates in advance all the problems of composition, modelization, reflexivity, agitation that I am obliged to deploy one after the other. The transcendence of nature already there, that a society always already present as a totality, and the skill of scholars and that of politicians is visible. 168. No. Sorry. 148. I was right about the 8. I was just off by a lot. How we mix up the sciences with politics. The contrary, the scientists and the politicians are collaborating in the same task. We finally understand their profound difference, the one the old Constitution never made it possible to bring out, because it was hopelessly buried in the impossible distinction between the truth of things and the will of humans, as if it were easier to say that what entities are than what they want. Politicians and scientists, I'm actually forgetting. Politicians and scientists all work on the same propositions, the same chains of humans and non-humans, all endeavor to represent them as faithfully as possible. Must we say that scientists do not adulterate what they say, unlike politicians, who supposedly practice the art of lying and dissimulation? The former had to convince, and the latter to persuade. No, because both callings delight in the art of transformations, the former to obtain reliable information on the basis of continual work of instruments, the latter to obtain the unheard metamorphosis of enraged or stifled voices into a single voice. Must we admit that they all have the same job? That is not true either, because the meaning of the word fidelity differs profoundly for the two types of skills. Scientists have to maintain the distance between the propositions they load into language and what they say about them. These two things will not be confused, whereas politicians have precisely to confuse them by continually modifying the definitions of the subjects who say, "We are, we want." The former are guardians of them, the latter, masters of the yes. It was thought that political ecology had to bring humans and nature together, whereas it actually has to bring together the scientific and the political ways of intermingling humans and non-humans. There is indeed a division of labor. There's not a division of the collective. The powerful impact of political ecology comes precisely from the synergy it's going to allow between the complementary competencies that everything requires us to connect, that only the prejudices of the old Constitution oblige us to separate to the distinct domains of reality. The collective has as much need to maintain distances scrupulously as it does to take the risk of abolishing them. If only these non-identical twins had not been separated at birth and given different missions, since the one had the job of representing nature truthfully, while only the prison of the cave was left to the other. Without this separation, it would be easy to understand that they have to collaborate on all the functions of the collective without confusing their qualities at any given moment. You might just as well tell masons, plumbers, carpenters, and painters to collaborate without ever telling them what public building they are to apply their successive and complementary talents. Rather, each type of skill comes in its turn and in its role to lend a hand in its own distinctive way the task to sort it out differently every time. Moreover, now that we have reached this point, nothing prevents us from saying that sciences proceed along a straight and narrow path while politics takes a crooked one, appropriating for our own purposes old metaphors that have long served to contrast the two regimes of public speech. 275. On this difference in the two regimes of enunciation, Bruno Latour, 2002. 140. The establishment of referential chains that allow us, through a series of continual and rule-governed transformations, to assure ourselves the faithfulness of representations, does indeed trace segments of straight lines. The hesitant speech that has to construct, through endlessly repeated gatherings, a sphere that will serve as a boundary between the inside and the outside, between them and us, in order to ensure the faithfulness of the representation, cannot be drawn with straight lines, but only. Yes, the political animal remains the prince of twisted birds. What makes him untruthful in the eyes of science, and it would make him a liar, on the contrary, if he tried to speak straight. Speaking to someone who draws a straight line where a curved line is required, say that he or she is going off on a tangent, fling the obligations of his or her mission, the way it would be with a politician who decided to start talking science. She would be abandoning the progressive composition of the envelope of the collective. She would go fast. She would go straight ahead. She would no longer be faithfully representing her constituents. In order to grow, the collective needs these two functions, dispersed everywhere. One allows it to catch hold of the multitudes without crushing them. The other allows it to get them to speak in a single voice without scattering. We are to begin to understand the collective's new function in a positive way. We allows to add to it the contributions of the other professions, market organizers, moralists, and later in Chapter 5, administrators. All right. Just gonna read more. My head hurts really bad, and I'm kind of losing my ability to think clearly and to retain this. So, stop for tonight. I might stream tomorrow so I can get the contribution of economists done, but it will be a really late stream if that's the case. Let's see, how many pages is this? Around 150. Let's see. Before we go, we'll see. How many pages is it? It's only 4 pages. So, we'll probably do it next time. I want to make sure I can get it somewhat decently. I didn't really think I needed to use my pen, my drawing tablet this time. But I will probably be using my drawing tablet in the future, for videos especially, when I'm trying to make points. And I'll try to draw them out and stuff like that. Add a little visual. Because finding visuals is kind of hard. So yeah, it's hard for me. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'll figure it out, I'm sure. But anyways, that is all. If you like what I do and you want more, you want to support me in some way, you can donate through Stream Elements. I'll also create a Patreon, but right now there won't really be much on there, I guess. I don't have a backdrop of videos, so I can't really do that. I'll figure something out, maybe. Maybe I will make different tiers or something like that. I don't fucking know. But yeah, until then, I'll figure something out. You know, I'll do like 5. I'll do like 2. I'm sorry. I'll do like $2 $5, $10 for the Patreon. And that way, if you want, you can just donate. I feel like those are reasonable increments. So yeah. Good night, everyone. Thank you for all. Sorry my head hurt. We couldn't get to the contribution of economists. But we'll get to it next time. Anyways, see you all later.